Hi guys, I'm Rachel, and in this video, I'll be discussing APPR and STEPS. I'll be diving in what it means, how they work together, the background, how it affects education, and more importantly, how it affects teachers. So let's begin. Starting with APPR, it's an acronym, and it stands for Annual Professional Performance Reviews. Late in 2024, the act was signed into law that institutes changes to the state's teachers and principal evaluation systems. The old evaluation system did a one-size-fits-all approach, which didn't really work for a new style or new generations, hence why this was signed into law about a year ago. Districts are allowed to locally develop programs and allow their educators a seat at a decision-making table, meaning that educators or principals or anyone in a district who works there and is employed can have a word on what gets said and not said about their evaluation. I knew if it was my evaluation, I would want a word of what gets evaluated, what's on it specifically, and more importantly, how well the system works. I'll get a little bit more into if I have a word in it when it comes to the STEPS part, but we're not quite there yet. The original evaluation focused heavily on grades 3 through 8, focusing on the subjects of math and English. And I can tell you for a fact that I was never the strongest in math specifically. And that would bring back the how it's the one-size-fits-all approach and how it doesn't work for everybody and how we have to take that into account. In December of 2015, it was voted by the Board of Regents to put a 4-year stop on grades 3 through 8 English and math assessments for APPRs. During this time, they worked to revise standards and transitions to a new vendor for the state assessment. Just for context, all these facts and backgrounds I'm discussing right now all apply to New York State. So during this time, the Board of Regents negotiated transitional plans for using teacher observations and other student performance measures to show student growth. I do have a little bit of a story that goes behind this. Looking back at it now as an early childhood education major, definitely makes sense. So my elementary school, you were with 2 grades at once typically. So it would be 1st and 2nd, 3rd and 4th, 5th and 6th. When I was in the 5th and 6th grade classroom, specifically when I was in the 5th grade, my teacher kind of didn't share a room, but there was a door towards the back that led to the other 5th and 6th grade classroom. And if the teacher was ever out or she had a meeting or had to run to the bathroom, the other teacher would kind of bring us into her room where she would observe us. Now, since we were the same grade, we were kind of on the same learning path, but you could never be too precise. Everyone's a little different in their learning. See what one teacher was doing, what the other teacher was doing to see the advancements or decline, or just the progression of a single classroom can make a difference. Okay. To show student growth, I think that tests are not the best way to do so. To show student growth, at the time, they were using tests, hence why they focused mainly on English and math in those certain grade levels. Now, that is not the best way to observe a student's growth. We know this, and this is a proven fact. And I think that by eliminating those standards, the tests, and putting a 4-year stop on the plan of how they usually did the one-size-fits-all approach was a really good step in moving in the right direction, considering the act that was signed into late 2024 that institute changes to the state's and teachers' and principals' evaluations. So it was just a little pondered thought I had that if they hadn't put a stop or realized that maybe this isn't the best approach, if we'll still be in that one-size-fits-all evaluation system. I remember taking tests all the way through the 8th grade about the standardized test, and I believe it was English, math, and science. And my teachers will always push hard on more of the English and math one than they did the science. They pushed hard for all, but they mostly focused heavily on the science ones, and now it makes sense on why, now that I know that that's what their evaluation kind of focused on. So, in 2019 and 2020, changes were made to the student performance portion of the APPR. The 2019 amendment to 3012D eliminated the requirement to use state tests and gives local representatives the right to negotiate the selection and use an assessment in a teacher or principal's evaluation. And that goes along with the first bullet point I made, where it institutes changes to the state's teachers and principals' evaluation systems. This time they could truly pinpoint what they want to see on their evaluations and what they think would improve and what they think could go away because it wasn't really constituting with their teaching style. Moving on to the negotiation part brings us to STEPS. Now, STEPS is also an acronym. It stands for Standard-Based Educator Evaluation and Professional Support. So similar to the APPR, how these two go hand in hand. The APPR is the actual evaluation itself, as STEPS has an online guide of what your evaluation will be included of. So it might say a teacher uses more technology-based teaching instead of a standard whiteboard and lecture. And those are okay, they're normal changes in our education. In our day-to-day lives, technology has become a huge part of us, and especially in education, it's no doubt that it's gonna be a student coworker if it's not already. In my observation class, all the students have Chromebooks where they have to do math assessments and English assessments. And I'm not sure if I find it truly beneficial, but I think it's just because I grew up on the old paper and pen system compared to today's students, which is okay. On the STEPS website, they also have resources for planning. So like I said earlier, everything I've talked about, including the APPR and the STEPS, applies to New York State. Each state does differ on their evaluation system, but it's very easy to look up and find which one best suits you. So now, we're going to be looking at some graphs and data on the teaching profession and how it affects their APPR evaluation. So let's begin, actually. Ready? So this graph shows qualified teachers leaving the profession. Now the graph starts in 2000, and we can see the incline from there. Now APPRs and graphs, they're not related, so keep that in mind. But I think it's interesting because it adds to the pressure of what a current educator might face compared to one that left because of the pressure. And that can affect someone's APPR performance, as we've seen in the past. So this graph, we see hours worked by teachers each week. So 35 hours is 12%, 40 to 45 hours is 38%, sorry, it was a little small there, and 50 plus hours is worked by over 50% of educators. Now these two graphs that I've showed apply to educators in the US all over, all states, not just New York. So with that amount of qualified teachers leaving the profession, plus the amount of teachers who work overtime, can definitely affect someone's APPR. So with that in mind, similar to the first graph with the amount of qualified teachers leaving the profession, we can look at numbers throughout the years. So in 2000, in the US, there were 2.9 million teachers. And in 2025, as of right now, there are 3.8 million teachers. So the number did increase, but at what cost? I know we're all going into the teaching. In 2000, there were 2.9 million teachers, and in 2025, as of right now, there are 3.8 million teachers. But at what cost? A lot of colleges, including myself, are planning to go into the education field. Teaching, assisting, special education, same umbrella of education itself. So the question is, why are we into this profession? We know it's not for the money, and clearly a lot of other teachers don't seem to think it's just suitable anymore. And comparing to that, and considering a lot of teachers worked 50 plus hours per week, it's a little scary thinking into the field we're going into. For me, I know why I'm going into education. I started in kindergarten and I struggled in school for a while, and teachers tried their best to help me, to assist me the best way possible, but none of their tactics or tricks or tools really worked for the kind of learning style my brain was working in. So I had to find my own tricks and tools for me to succeed the best in school as possible. I didn't find out about these tips and tricks until the 8th grade, when I was already halfway through my student educational career. So I don't want any other student to go through what I had to, and I want to help as many kids as possible get over that hump if they face the same challenges. So that's just me, but all of us have many different reasons on why we want to go into the field. It just depends on if we could really make that difference and if we really want to stay. Okay. So out of that 3.8 million teachers, and 76% are female and 24% are male. Now that number doesn't really matter. Now that those percentages and numbers, once again, don't affect the APPR or STEPS. It's kind of a psychological mind trick where it just sets more pressure for someone to achieve, especially if you have family in the district. If you have a past relative who was a teacher, you want to do good for them. You want to do good for the reason why you went into teaching. and that can add to the pressure. Everyone's different. Everyone has their own learning style and teaching style. It's just the matter that we make in someone's life. So to recap, annual professional performance review means evaluations for teachers, principals, teachers' assistants, anyone who's employed by your district. Just, if you ever have a second guess about a teacher questioning their styles, just know that they are evaluated, that they are qualified. Steps, if you're not really an educator or a district, you probably don't really need to worry about that. But if you are, definitely keep listening. Steps is a great resource to use. If you're ever stressing or worried about your evaluation coming up, you can always go to Steps. They have different you can always go to Steps. If you're ever worried about your upcoming evaluation, you can always go to the Steps website. They have different formats, different qualification, subject, and teacher needs. So if you're an arts teacher at an elementary school, they'll have that requirement sheet ready for you. If you teach Algebra 2 at a high school, they have it for you. If you're at a school for the deaf and you need an evaluation, they'll have that for you, I think. Anyway, thank you so much for watching and listening to this video. I really appreciate it. I hope this video you could walk a better understanding of APPR and STEPS, what it means, how it affects the education field, and how it affects teachers. Thank you. Okay. Or just the progression of a single classroom can make a difference. Bro. So fun. On the STEPS website, they also have resources for planning. You serious? Atticus! 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 Zip it!